Hi, students. What's going on? We just had spring break, and it's actually spring break right now for me on Friday. And I've been working all the way through spring break. I haven't stopped working. So, um, anyway, we're going to start out this new week on chapter 7 in your textbook, and we're going to be looking at cognition and problem solving in the everyday world. Okay, and this relates to, all the way through the lifespan, really from childhood all the way to older adulthood. Okay. And so we'll talk about chapter 7 now. Remember that the important concepts that I kind of illustrate in this lecture, you want to take those concepts and write them down, and then make sure that you read the information in chapter 7 to kind of understand what I'm talking about when I say, for example, what is wisdom, for example. Okay. All right. So make sure that just take key points that I talk about in this lecture, write those down, and then go to the book, look those up, and that's what's important to know. For your quiz and also for your discussion this week. Okay. So I hope everybody had a relaxing kind of a spring break. I was able to watch a little Netflix and see some Korean dramas, so at least I didn't spend all my time working, but I did work quite a lot this spring break. Okay, in your book, there are 3 important kind of concepts that the book talks about: cognitive intellectual development, that's Shy's model, Shy and Willis's revised cognitive stage model, and then Piaget's formal operational stage, and then what others called post-formal thought that they kind of tacked on to Piaget's original theory. And if you remember Piaget, he mainly was looking at a stage model of how children's cognitive development changes over time up to the end of adolescence. Okay. Now, before we get into these, excuse me, and talk about them, I do want to introduce a theory. It's a lifespan theory that looks at the motivations of people over the adulthood period, and it's called Socio-Emotional Selectivity theory. Okay, and it may have just been alluded to earlier in the book, but not much, and we'll talk about it more later on, but I do want to introduce it to you and talk about it because many of the aspects of that theory actually fit in with, cognitive items that are in this chapter 7, okay? Now, in that theory, SST, socio-emotional selectivity theory, the writer, Carstensen, says that the primary motivation of younger adults is to gain knowledge so that they can, succeed in a career or succeed in relationships or other areas. Okay, because in young adulthood you're going to college and you're picking up lots of knowledge, and you're kind of thinking about what is important to remember for a career. Okay, and so mainly younger adulthood is a time when people kind of set the knowledge foundation for the rest of their life. Okay, now, as one moves through younger adulthood and toward the middle of middle adulthood, you think that time is kind of unlimited. Okay, and so you're still gaining lots of knowledge. Okay, even on the job, even in your relationships, etc., in your career. Okay, but some point in middle adulthood, or the end of middle adulthood, people start to think that time left in life is limited. Okay, and so then they see, well, there's an end to life, I'm going to change my motivation. And that's what this theory also says, that somewhere when a person's time perception changes about how much time is left in life, they're going to change their primary motivation. All right, what do you think that would be? Well, they want to start, dropping kind of negative people out of their social networks and kind of surrounding themselves with positive people. And why do they do that? It's because they want to feel good. Okay, they want to have a positive buffer against the world. Okay, so they can feel better about themselves and about others, and then continue through to the end of life. Okay, and so the primary motivation in older adulthood becomes one that is centered around emotion regulation. Okay, older adults, are going through so many changes, right? Physically and cognitively, and they want to be able to feel good emotionally. Okay, and so they want to kind of have a positive outlook on life and go into the great beyond, right? With a positive feeling. Okay. And so now, with those ideas in mind, let's kind of talk through these things. I'm going to go to the book right now. I'm looking at the table that talks about Schei's stage model of cognitive intellectual development. And he says in childhood and adolescence, there's a kind of a description of the stage here. It says it's an acquisitive period. In other words, children and adolescents are picking up information, right? Just like that theory I just talked about. And they're having kind of a broad acquisition of knowledge. They're not really going into a specialty yet, but they're just picking up, a nice foundation of knowledge that they can use for the rest of their life. That's their motivation for their cognitive processes. Okay. Now, in young adulthood, it says achieving, the achieving stage. This is where one takes the knowledge that they have picked up, probably in high school or in college, right? And they apply that knowledge to achieving long-term goals. Okay. How should I use what I know? Now, there's an interesting thing that I have come across with seniors here at ENMU, and that is they get to the final semester and then they say, I'm not sure what I want to do. Okay. They've even chosen a major and worked through the major, and they still don't know what they want to do. Okay. But now, one needs to sort of choose or select some area, a career, and move into that area and apply for jobs, right? Or go on to graduate school and get some advanced training in a specialized area, okay? But eventually, you want to apply the knowledge that you picked up, right? The general knowledge, and then also the more specific knowledge from your major, and then go out and achieve your goals, okay? So that's what happens in young adulthood. Some people don't do that, though, do they? Right? They wait until middle adulthood, right? They just kind of walk along and they pick up any career that they can find. And then sometime in middle adulthood, they say, I'd like to go back and finish college, right? I'd like to, change what I've been doing all this time. And so in middle adulthood here, according to this stage theory, one is responsible and executive in the description of stage. And it says the middle adults use knowledge to take care of others and or for leadership roles. And so, you can think of middle adults as being really responsible kinds of people because they're not only taking care of children, right? They're also probably taking care of aging parents. Okay. And so, it's a difficult stage of life, really based on responsibilities to other people. Okay. But then also, some people want to change their focus and become leaders in a different field. Okay. And so sometimes they go back to college and they change their ideas about what they want to do for a career, and that's okay, right? And then they repurpose their life cognitively to focus on that new area, okay? And then in older adulthood, it says here in this stage model, it's called Re-Integrative, okay? A selective use of knowledge for meaningful purposes. All right. How do we create meaning in our life in older adulthood? Well, I talked about it from that theory, right? We start to surround ourselves with positive people, and we start to maybe, selectively use knowledge that makes us have a positive kind of an outlook on life. Okay. Now, this, if you take this theory and you kind of think about that theory and then place it across all of these levels of Shy's stage model of cognitive intellectual development, you're going to see that cognition kind of follows the same kind of primary motivations that we have when we look at gaining knowledge and then having emotion regulation at the end of life. Okay. All right. It kind of follows all of that. Now on another figure here, it shows a revised cognitive stage model. Okay. Kind of follows all of the items that were in the first ideas in Shy's model of cognitive intellectual development, but it adds some stuff at the end. Okay. It talks about reintegration and legacy creating motivations in the old stage and the oldest old stage. Okay. So, you can read that section and understand how he kind of revised this model to represent, people at the end of life, the old, and the oldest old. Okay. Now, back to Piaget, we know that he had kind of a four-stage model of how children develop cognitively through childhood and adolescence, and they start with kind of learning about the world and adapting to the world using their sensory and motor skills. Okay, and then they go through a pre-operational stage where I don't know, we can count things on fingers, right? Like I have four objects. Well, the child will go, 1, 2, 3, 4 on their fingers. And, later on, they do those kinds of operations in their head. That's called the concrete operational stage. Okay. And you probably read Piaget's stages. And then they go into the formal operational stage where they start to understand abstract ideas, okay? And they can kind of use those concepts in their head and think about what is freedom, what is justice, what are some of the abstractions of these, right? And they can take other people's perspectives and they can understand that, variables have lots of different causes, okay? Not just one, but many, many causes, okay? And so, people in the formal operational stage can really start to, deduce things logically using abstract information. Okay. Now, the book talks about post-formal thought. That's an addition to Piaget's original four stages. Okay. And you can look in the book and see what post-formal thought is. All right, let's go to the next slide. This is on wisdom, okay? Now, this is an interesting area. You might think that older people are wise, but are all older people wise, or are some young people also wise, okay? Is wisdom really an age-related thing? No, I don't think it is, okay? Wisdom is expert knowledge and insight about the fundamental pragmatics of life. Okay. Now, what is pragmatics? You probably want to look up that term and find out. Okay. But if I'm a pragmatic person, I'm not going to do things the same way over and over and make the same mistakes over and over. I'm going to change, okay, my approach to problems based on experiences, okay? So wisdom involves a balance between, reflection and action. So maybe I've done something wrong to solve a problem early in life or something, and I've taken the wrong action, and then I probably want to revise my, reflect on my mistake and then revise my approach to the same kind of problem that occurs in the future and do a different action, okay, that might improve upon my previous try, okay. It's also cognition and emotion, okay. How well do I think about problems in the world, and do I react emotionally, or do I use emotion to make decisions and things like that? Well, there's a delicate balance between these things, okay? So, as I said earlier, age does not automatically lead to wisdom. As you can see in the textbook, they talk about research studies in there. And, you can just commonsensically kind of reason that there are probably some pretty wise adolescents that we know, okay? There are some probably unwise older people that we know, okay? So wisdom doesn't really reflect age progression, okay? Now, I have a nice little talk on practical wisdom that I'd like you to watch, and it's a TED Talk. And I think it's important for your discussion this week, okay? All right, let's go to the next slide. It says, there are some things in your book about decision making. How do we make decisions as a younger adult or an older adult in a health context, okay? Well, as I said earlier, that socio-emotional selectivity theory kind of applies to this. Older adults like to see positive kinds of content or information when they make decisions about, their health care, okay? Whereas younger adults don't really seek out that, very positive information to make decisions about, health, okay? In the consumer context, you want to look up decision making for younger and older adults and how they buy things, okay? It seems that older adults, have fewer choices that they make, or fewer kinds of, I don't know, comparisons that they make when they buy something, because they have a lot of experience before in buying things, right? And maybe they want to buy a new car and they know what, just a set of alternatives that they want to go out and purchase. Whereas a younger adult takes time, usually, and selects between many, many different types of cars, right? Before they make their final decision. Okay, and so it seems that older adults have a smaller kind of a subset of choices that they select from, whereas younger adults have a wider kind of selection plate. Okay. Now, in a legal context, decision making in a legal context, if an older adult has kind of pre instructions, about the decisions that they're going to be making based on evidence, that kind of assists them in making good decisions in a legal context. So, say they're on a jury, okay? They need kind of guidance in the pre-decisional phase to make good decisions. Okay, so read your book about these things in those different contexts. All right. The book talks about social cognition and how changes occur across the lifespan for these things. How do you make impressions based on other people, impression formation? How do you make attributions about the cause of another person's behavior or your own behavior? You've probably taken social psychology, so you're probably familiar with the what's called the fundamental attribution error. Okay, if another person fails and I see them fail, let's say they fail a test, what do you think the cause of their behavior might be in my mind? Okay, well, you might think that person's probably not too smart and that's why they failed the test. Okay, that's kind of an internal attribution that I'm making about another person. Okay, and I don't say that I do that, but that's what people do. Okay, they make internal attributions about another person's failure. Okay, they attribute the cause of that person's failure to inner kinds of things. Okay, but if I fail, okay, and I'm talking about me, if I fail a test, how do you think I'm going to attribute the cause of that? It's probably going to be something external to me. Okay, it's not that I'm stupid. Okay, it's because the professor put the wrong questions on the test. Okay, it's the professor's fault, right? So that's an external attribution. So read that section. I think it's interesting on causal attributions and the fundamental attribution error. Okay. Now, I don't think you need to read too much about moral reasoning, but that's in the book. I don't think you need to read too much about collaborative cognitive activities. That's working in teams or working socially with other people. Okay. And then it has a short section on emotion and cognition that you can kind of gloss over. But I think the first two things on this slide are probably important. Okay. All right. So that's my little contribution this week to a lecture that you'll watch and then you'll read your chapter 7 based on what I've emphasized in this short lecture. And then I want you to take some notes on those emphasized concepts and then take your quiz 7 and complete your discussion 7 for this week. Okay. Now, if you had a low midterm grade, it's probably not your fault, right? It's probably due to circumstances. Okay. But you want to turn in work. Okay. If you're missing a lot of work or you're missing a little bit of work, as you go through the course, please catch up. Okay. Even if it was like discussion 1, I didn't complete discussion 1. Well, that was still worth 10 points. You want to complete it and then turn it in. Okay. So I can grade it. Okay. All right. So that is just about it for this week. And I hope you had a good spring break. And I'll see you again next week, at the beginning of next week. Okay. Bye-bye.